Hi everyone. So this is not my day job. My day job is a partner in Reinventure with Simon Kent, but this is a journey that I've been on for about 5 years now. And so I'm stepping in today for Paul McCartney, who is the CEO and co-founder, and who is busy building the company, which makes me very happy as an investor in that company. Before we jump into data, I just want to really quickly whip through the story of money, because we think this is one of the most fascinating parallels that exist. If you think back to the early days of money, it was a very, very insecure and difficult means of exchanging value. People used to store money under their beds, buried in their backyards. The banking industry arose in small towns to try and address the issues of money. But even those were plagued with a lot of risks and a lot of issues. It was hard to transport, and there was a big risk of physical theft. But as the banking sector evolved and adopted technology, it really transformed the way that money got handled and managed within the economy. So there are a couple of things that were really key. One was centralized security and governance. So by creating a common framework, a common legal framework particularly for how they dealt with money, and then a common technology framework for how interoperability of money worked, that gave rise to liquidity and ease of transport and movement of money, particularly as money digitized. That has accelerated particularly. And then with the ability to lever money with credit creation, we basically had the modern banking industry as one of the most powerful forces of economic growth in the last 100 years. The only challenge with it is that credit creation has a cap on it in terms of how much you can lever money. If you push beyond that cap, you get into dangerous territory like we have with the GFC most recently. But we think that there are enormous parallels between the banking industry and the emerging data industry. In fact, we think, with a Reinventure hat on, that data is perhaps the biggest adjacency to banking. And the parallel I want to draw here is breaking down the main functions that a bank performs and looking at that through a money lens and then looking at that through a data lens. So the first of the main three jobs of a bank is to handle deposits and savings. And so we have accounts that money can be deposited into. In data, we've got the newly emerging space of personally identifiable information data banking. So as part of building our Data Republic, we built an entity called Data Bank, which is currently housed behind the Westpac firewall. And it is the first data banking service in the world where a company can open an account and just deposit its customers' PI information in that account, and in exchange get back a tokenized version of that identity, which then gives rise to increased and enhanced security features around its data. The second job that a bank performs is transacting in merchant services. So the payments rails and payments infrastructure that they have in place, which enables commerce to occur in a very frictionless, immediate and real-time manner. In data, what we're seeing increasingly is personalization of experiences being manifested through data that's exchanged between organizations. So whereas a bank might know how much of its customers' spend is split between different airline carriers, the airline knows when the bank's customers are traveling overseas. Both of them have an important piece of the picture which allows them to give a better experience to their customers, but no one has the whole picture. And so data exchange enables that personalization to be magnified. And lastly, borrow and insure, the last main function of a bank. And this is where borrowing and lending of data, or giving rise to data liquidity, can fundamentally transform the economy. And particularly by doing so, enable data to be valued. So data is probably the single largest asset that any company has that is not recognized on its balance sheet today. So what happens when we share data? Well, an estimate from McKinsey is that there's around $3 to $5 trillion of value to be unlocked through data, which is why we think it's perhaps the biggest market adjacent to banking that exists. And it goes across every single segment of the economy. And not just segments of the economy, this is the commercial value, but we also think that data has a huge role to play in transforming social issues in the economy. And so, as I said, we think that data has the potential to be the most significant driver of microeconomic reform and social development in the next 2 decades. And all that's missing to enable this is the creation of banking infrastructure for data. to enable data to have security and governance so that people have confidence that one of the most precious assets as it transitions around the economy is going to be dealt with in a secure, privacy compliant and competitively governed way. That we create liquidity and ease of movement in data, and we create the ability to borrow and lend data between organisations. So where are we at today in this data exchange journey in the economy? Well, there are only 2 observed data companies in the world of any scale and substance, and they're Google and Facebook. And Google's asset is really observed search intent data, increasingly with some geolocated data sourced through its Android platform. And Facebook is really social intent data that it's observing. But the most valuable signal that exists in data exists in actual transactions. So not asking people what they're going to do, but observing what people actually do. And then through that observation, informing how to personalise experiences for them. But that transactional data is trapped inside individual companies. And all of those companies today operate as islands, trying to figure out how to personalise experience for their customers, just with their own very, very narrow lens on the world. So data sharing is starting to emerge, particularly what we call bilateral data shares. So 2 organisations, a bank and an airline, who are friendly enough with each other to sit down and have a conversation to say, if we shared data with each other, we could both solve a problem that each of us has. And so they embark on that journey. The challenge they face as soon as they embark on that journey is it's around 6 to 9 months to execute one bilateral data share. The first issue they have to solve is primarily legal. So the legal framework takes around 6 months to put in place between 2 large-scale conservative organisations. The second problem they have is the technology challenge. Do I give you my data or do you give me yours? Who holds it? How do we deal with the personally identifiable information? How does this tie into the privacy policy agreement that I have with my customers? The third problem they've got is it's a hypothesis that the data sharing will add value. So the actual discovery and the ability to drive discovery on will this data share drive value in my organisation doesn't exist. The actual analytical work involved in a bilateral data share is generally just a couple of weeks, but the process itself is 6 to 9 months. And that cost to value ratio is, we think, the single biggest inhibitor to widespread data sharing between organisations that exist today. And for companies, the stakes are really high. They are concerned about brand, they're concerned about customer reactions, they're concerned about asset leakage, they're concerned about competitors getting their hands on data insights that they have in their organisation and that they might be used against them. And all of these fears are well-founded, but they're also relatively easily addressed. So Data Republic's seeking to solve this problem in a very, very deliberate way. And unusually for a startup, we spent a large part of the first year of our life working solely through the legal and governance framework before we cut code. And then we designed the platform to deliver on the legal innovation that we had developed. So we created an environment that's private by design, secure by design, governed by design, and then developed out with an open platform ecosystem strategy in mind. So what we've built is data exchange technology, so infrastructure that enables organisations to house transactional data, deposit customer identity information, work with tokenized data to match insights across different companies to the same individual customer in an incredibly secure, privacy compliant and well-governed way. So that might enable 2 organisations who just want to work privately with themselves to do it privately on platform and execute something at speed. Or it might enable an organisation to share with 4 or 5 other parties who they didn't previously know, but for whom they can all of a sudden get leverage out of those shared insights. We currently have one of the largest data assets in the country on platform. We have 2 of the major 4 banks in NAB and Westpac, Qantas with their loyalty data, WorldSmart with grocery transaction data, and a number of other data contributors that are coming on board at increasing rates. We then make that data available through an API layer to a partner ecosystem. So Data Republic is intending to be purely a platform and nothing else, and to enable anyone who wants to build data products on top of that to do so. So we have around 30 to 40 partners building on top of that at the moment, and including a number of startups where some of the most interesting innovation is taking place. And then from that, what we are looking to build, much like the App Store, maybe the App Store for data is a good analogy here, is a marketplace where an unlimited number of data products which drive new insights for customers, experiences, business challenges can be bought by organisations who want to drive those data strategies into their business and change course and direction for their company. And importantly in this, that this is any data, the way that we think about it, any data that ultimately works down to an individual level and where there's value in sharing. So government data is particularly relevant, particularly when combined with private enterprise data in being made available to solve social issues that exist. So one of the initiatives that we launched last year, again unusual for a startup, is a not-for-profit foundation called the Minerva Collective, which is all about data for social good. So it is an organisation that partners with not-for-profit companies, brings together voluntary data science resources, developers, etc., people who want to give a little bit of their time to good causes, and then requests access to corporate data to solve problems in society. To give you an example of some of the problems we're talking about, one of the initiatives our teams are working on is around reducing domestic violence by looking at signals in telco data to understand when escalating behaviour may lead to a trigger in violence, and then working with the organisations who drive early intervention programs to people who are at risk and giving them the actual early signal that they need to intervene, which actually does not exist for them at all in the world today. Similarly, transaction data, so credit card transaction data, changes in data patterns can signal financial distress, and financial distress can be an early indicator for domestic violence. And so domestic violence, childhood obesity, there is an infinite range of social issues that we think can be addressed in fundamentally different ways by just giving organisations access to data in a way that is fast, cheap and easy. And similarly, for businesses, we see the same opportunity for them to transform the way that they do business today. So our vision for the future world is we want to drive towards a data-driven economy. We're big believers in the philosophy of open data and working with the federal government in thinking about open data as in the broadest possible way and how important it is to balance privacy concerns for individual with unlocking the latent value that exists in data today. And through our platform, we want to enable a new generation of startups to go out and build some of the amazing new products of the future. We want to enable everybody to drive to better decision-making processes, and ultimately our vision is to have data from Data Republic embedded inside the decision-making processes of every company who's serious about personalising experiences and making effective decisions. For consumers, we want to enable a world of highly personalised customer experiences, which means when you get off the plane in San Francisco, your credit card is not cancelled automatically because there has been a privacy-compliant data share which enables the bank to know that you're travelling and transactions conducted in this geographic zone are not at risk. And finally, we want to enable data to be brought onto the balance sheet. And we think that when we do enable data to be brought on the balance sheet, that will unlock a wide range of secondary opportunities for organisations in creating value through what we think is the single largest latent asset that exists in the economy today. Thank you.